Welcome back to the bullshit filter, Ray Harris.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
This is the continuation of our fascism series. This is episode 3 of Fascism for people playing along at home. So what we're trying to do is understand the roots of fascism. We hear a lot of talk these days, particularly about the US, but also about Italy, Germany, the rise of 21st century fascism, and there's some debate. Is it fascism? Is it not fascism? How do you know fascism? Is it like pornography? The American judge said, I know it when I see it.
Right.
Do you know fascism when you see it?
If they're having sex, I do. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's pornographic fascism, which is my favorite kind of fascist pornography. Those Hugo Boss suits that they wear, and then they get them off. It's beautiful.
Slowly take them. You know what? Let's save that for the climax.
The jack boots.
Go ahead. Don't take those off.
In the first couple of episodes, we traced the roots of fascism from the French Revolution through the 19th century into the early 20th century. We looked at some of the precursors and some of the things that happened to give rise to fascism. But what I want to do in this episode is start to get into what it looked like in Italy, in Germany, in Spain, roughly 100 years ago. Started in the 20s.
Yeah.
And in this episode, I want to have a look at the role that World War I played in the role of fascism in Italy in the 20s, and also in Germany. But we'll start with Italy. But, you know, World War I, kids playing at home, First World War, 1914 to 1918, was obviously a cataclysm that shattered the old world order and radicalized millions of people, particularly in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It was the war to end all wars, they called it, and it really, I guess, made a lot of people think about the old world order, the sort of the kings of Europe. You'd had Napoleon 100 years earlier, the French Revolution and Napoleon start to really make people question the idea of who gets to be a king, why are these people kings, and why can't I be a king? You sort of saw the rise of nationalism throughout Europe after the French Revolution.
Exactly.
But then you get to World War I 100 years later. There's still this old world order in existence. It's changed a lot. New borders, unifications happened in places like Germany and Italy that we talked about in the last couple of episodes. But the First World War had glorified violence in many ways and sacrifice in the name of the country on a mass scale. And these things had always been around. Violence and sacrifice in the act of war. We go back to Alexander the Great, go back earlier than that. These things had always been around, but this was on a scale that the human race had never seen before. Millions and millions of people dying on battlefields for glory, for the nation, under a flag, and it produced what Hannah Arendt, one of the great scholars of fascism writing in the middle of the 20th century, called the front generation. Men who were bonded by comradeship in battle, disillusioned with civilian society, contemptuous of the liberal order that had existed. They were questioning the authenticity of the old world order, and the old world order hadn't experienced the authenticity of the struggle. They stayed at home. They sent their young men off to battle. Young men came back, and a lot of the veterans felt like the war had given their life meaning and purpose. They had fought for something, and they were angry when they got back. They saw the peacetime democracy as kind of weak, kind of corrupt, and they wanted more control over their countries. They wanted more say in how things were run. And the proto-fascists used this military experience and this anger, this disenchantment that millions of men had when they got back from the war to turned them into a force to overturn the established political system. Comments on that, Ray?
Well, I just remember being a teenager and reading, and I was shocked, but I remember reading about before World War I kicks off. You know, they've been planning for this for years. They've got systems set up in place. They've got train schedules, and they are quite eager because no one really has a sense of the scale that's about to unfold. And so you're right. So the war kicks off. Millions of people die. Life is upturned for years. Again, millions. And by the time they get home, some of the questions they're asking is, what did we do this for? What did we sacrifice for? When change comes in any form, some people embrace it. Some people are open to it. Some people are not. And they want to have more control. They want to keep things the way they are. Obviously, those in power want the status quo to remain. But as we're going to get to, and you're right, World War I shattered everybody's thoughts about everything because this was something that it never happened before. So as we go into this, and I won't go too far, but and you made this point, fascism does well because it's, let's be honest, it's extreme. When it's extreme in its attempt to solve problems. It does well when things aren't going well. And as you just hinted at, after World War I, Europe is desolated. I mean, Italy felt cheated. It was promised some territory. It didn't get it. Its economy is in shambles. There's unemployment, there's strikes, there's food shortages, there's soldiers who are very angry and disillusioned, just like you said. There's the rise of the socialists, of the communists who are trying to go, no, there's a better way, there's a different way. And it's that, and it's coming from the left that is threatening those who like the status quo, that Mussolini and others are able to tap into and turn it into a political force with fists. And so you're right. I think if World War I doesn't destroy Europe the way it does, that people like Mussolini and Hitler would have had a harder time because there would have been less devastation for them to fight against.
Yeah, Hannah Arendt said that these men valued death and war rather than pity and helplessness.
Yeah.
And wanted to, there was this idea of elevating violence and power against what they saw as society's liberal hypocrisy, hip, hop, hip it to the hip, hoppity don't stop, rock it to the bang bang boogie, up jump the boogie to the beat.
Yeah. Hypocrisy.
Sure, if it's hypocrisy or hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy.
Go with hypocrisy.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy.
Yeah.
The war produced millions of men who were psychologically primed for a movement that promised national resurrection through force. And Italy, of course, was the cradle of fascism now, which is as it should be, because as students of the Roman Empire, we love the idea of men walking the streets holding up fasces to say,
yes.
Stand back.
Yeah.
We have the power.
Right.
Even though Italy, unlike Germany, emerged from World War I on the winning side, Italians still felt humiliated by peace.
Yeah.
The Italians didn't get, excuse me, Italians didn't get all of the territory that they expected, that they were promised.
Right.
And there was economic crisis and social unrest. At the outbreak of World War I in 1914, Italy was technically part of the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary, but when the shooting started...
Rome, yeah, let's switch.
Rome wiggled out of it by claiming the alliance was defensive.
Right.
And since Austria-Hungary had gone on the offensive against Serbia, Italy wasn't obliged to recognize the alliance. And for nearly a year, Italy stayed neutral, which really meant shopping around for the best deal.
Exactly. And in that deal, they were promised some land.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, expand on that, Ray.
Well, that's when you're Britain and France and you want all the help you can get. Let's be honest. We've all done this on a date with a hot girl. We're not sure how it's going to end. You will promise anything to seal the deal. And Britain and France did. They promised Italy, is it northern Italy, the Tyrol? I'm trying to remember exactly what they were promised, but yeah, they were promised some territory. So not only do they lose people, not only is their economy wrecked, there's now social upheaval, like you were saying, but they don't even get the benefits of going through all that shit. So there's a lot of upset people. And as like you said, we know in our Roman Caesar series, the Romans don't mind solving their problems fisticuffs, So there's a lot of tension in the street.
Yeah, basically at the outbreak of the war, Austria gave them some vague promises of land that they would get after the war, but the Allies, Britain, France, and Russia,
Yeah.
offered them parts of Austria-Hungary, the
Why
South
not?
Tyrol, Trentino, Istrian Peninsula, and even bits of the Ottoman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
That was enough to flip Italy. So
Yeah.
in May 1915, Italy declared war on Austria-Hungary, joined the Allies, later declared war on Germany in 1916.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't really, change wasn't really from one side to the other. They actually never fought for the Central Powers. They just abandoned their old allies and accepted
Right.
some new ones once the bribes were attractive enough. And that sort of fit the classic Italian realpolitik at the time, like treaties are conditional, borders are negotiable.
Yeah.
What makes it even spicier is that after the war, many Italians felt cheated because they didn't get all of the territory that they had been promised in the secret Treaty of London. They felt that they had been ripped off. It was known as a mutilated victory because they were promised a bunch of stuff, they didn't get it, and that became fuel for Mussolini's rise a few years later.
Yeah.
1919, the country is swept by labour strikes and peasant land sieges in what was called the Biennio Rosso, the Red Biennium.
Mm-hmm.
The Biennio Rosso was like this spasm of revolutionary energy right after World War I from about 1919 to 1920. So what you need to remember is not only has the world, particularly Europe, just been through World War I, but the Russian Revolution has just happened as well. So we have this devastating world war, the worst war in human history to that point. And you also see the people in Russia rising up, overthrowing their monarchs, killing their monarchs, saying, the people are taking power. And that's inspiring to people right throughout the world. In this case, particularly in Europe, but it was also true in Australia. It was true in the United States. There was a lot of excitement.
Yeah.
People wanted to get a piece of the action.
Right.
Who
Well,
wouldn't want to kill a king?
well, not only that, but we don't have to live like this. I'm actually allowed to rebel, because what I was taught and my father was taught and my grandfather was taught was that God wanted that line of people, that family, to appoint kings and to rule over us. And I thought I'd be going against God. You mean it's okay to not be happy and resist? Fucking sign me up. And a lot of people, living shit lives, looking for something better. Just this chance of something better.
So you imagine a whole society coming back from the trenches of World War I. They're traumatized, they're angry, they're starving when they get home, it's financial crises. Then they're thrown into this atmosphere where they're looking at another country, Russia, that's overthrowing their monarchs, their elite, the bourgeoisie. And they're like, okay. So that can be done.
Right.
In the same way that 100 years earlier, the French Revolution happened, and the countries around Europe, well, it's a bit more than 100 years at that point. It was 150 years earlier, give or take, and the American Revolution slightly before that too, had seen people challenge the idea that monarchs were forever.
Right.
Now it's challenging the idea that particularly the capitalist elite are forever, and people want a taste of socialism. They want more economic liberality. They want more economic freedom. Why are we starving and you're driving a Rolls Royce?
Right. At the end of the episode 2, you read off of the the demands that the fascists in Italy were making about, land distribution, more of the profits go to the people. You list off like 7 or 8 things. And so again, these people are not only pissed, but they have a very specific idea, at least of the end goal of what they would want to see, which is a hell of a lot more equality than they're getting now. All right, Hitler. Basically.
Uh, so, sorry, we're actually in Italy. So factories went on strike, peasants occupied land, trade unions organized mass protests.
Yeah.
Workers were pushing not just for better wages, but for actual workers' control of industry. And at its height in Italy, hundreds of thousands of factory workers, particularly in places like Turin and Milan, literally took over plants and ran them under workers' councils, inspired by what they were seeing happening with the Soviets in Russia.
Right.
Meanwhile, in the countryside, sharecroppers and peasants were staging massive land sieges in central and southern Italy. The Italian state looked paralyzed, and for a hot minute it seemed like a socialist revolution might be on the cards. The Socialist Party in Italy was actually pretty strong, but was divided between moderates who wanted parliamentary reform and radicals who dreamed of Bolshevism.
Right.
A complete replay of what happened between the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks in Russia a few years earlier.
Right.
And that disunity in the socialist parties, combined with the hesitation of the trade unions, meant that the moment for a socialist revolution in Italy fizzled. And by late 1920, the factory occupations collapsed without any sort of real structural change. The Red Biennium didn't really want to bring socialism to Italy, but it terrified the conservative establishment and the middle classes.
Yeah.
And that fear created sort of a fertile ground for Mussolini's fascists, who pitched themselves as the iron fist that would restore order.
Right.
Remember, in our earlier episodes, I talked about Trotsky's view that fascism is the tool that the conservative elite deploy when they are concerned that the people are getting restless, that the traditional mechanisms of control of the people to keep them in their place, combination of propaganda, the education system, the media, law and order, incentives to keep them at work, the farce of the political system, making them feel like they have a say in how things go. When those things start not to work as well, and it looks like the people are going to rise up and demand more money, more power, more control, a different kind of politician, that fascism is the tool that the conservative elite deploy to shut down that kind of progressive movement.
Right.
That's what we see happen in Italy.
If I could, because you make an interesting point. It's not like they wanted Italy to be communist. They're like, we want things to be a little better. We want things to be a little fairer. We want a slightly bigger piece of the pie because we do the majority of the work. And so, but there was really no way for them to put that in the words. And so for the establishment, it seems radical. It seems like they're going for everything. And I'm not trying to get political here, but it's like, if you're in America right now and you're big on the Second Amendment, there is no little tiny tweak of the law that you're willing to tolerate, probably because you see it as baby steps, a slippery slope. They're going to eventually come for your guns. Well, that's kind of the same thing here. We can't, don't demand, because they're demanding a little bit, but it seems like a lot to those who own it. And the second point that I wanted to make, first of all, the government of Italy, a parliamentary democracy, cannot handle this. They have no idea what to do. I don't know if they didn't have the right people in place, but they're overwhelmed. And the last thing is, you're right, though, the people who are landowners, the people that own the means of production, they're good. Like, I'm not so much a fascist, but if we can use the fascists to bash them over the head, to put them back in their place, that you're right, that the word tool is perfect. We will hire them. We will, whatever we got to do, incorporate them, but we will use them to put these extremists, these left radicals down. What comes after that? I don't know, but they certainly don't mind using a bludgeon to get rid of a threat to their pocket.
Well, you say they can't put it into words, but they did. We read the Fascist Manifesto
Right. No, I mean,
in our last
it seemed
episode.
right. But what I'm saying is they're not looking for everything and the moon. They just want a better dealing. But if you're the one that owns a factory, you're like, I like the way things are now. So anything you say to
Yeah.
me about changing the equation, that's radical. That's extreme. I should be able to use violence against you.
Well, speaking of violence, that's when the squadristi became a thing in Italy, the black shirt street fighters
Mm-hmm.
who rose up directly as a reaction to the upheaval of those 2 years, 1990, 1920.
Right.
The Red Biennium was Italy's near revolution, the closest the country ever got to a 1917-style communist upheaval, and its failure sort of cleared the way for the fascists to look like the solution for the people. So
Heroes.
Italy's bourgeois, the propertied classes, and the conservative politicians were looking for a force that could restore order, prevent a socialist revolution from happening. And into this breach stepped Benito Mussolini, who was a former socialist agitator who then turned ultra-nationalist.
Yeah.
During the war, Mussolini broke with the pacifist wing of the Socialist Party and embraced an extreme pro-war, pro-nation stance. Before he was a dictator, he was one of the brightest stars of the Italian socialist movement. And his story is almost Shakespearean, this meteoric rise inside of the party and inside of Italy, and then turning coat with dramatic consequences, and then obviously his demise. It's interesting, in preparation for this show, I went back and was reading newspapers from 1913 through the 20s and the 30s, looking for the earliest mentions of Mussolini. And there was a lot turning up in socialist newspapers. I think I posted one on Facebook, the Shawnee Socialist from Shawnee, Kansas, I think, near Topeka, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day when there were socialist newspapers 100 years ago.
Wow.
Socialist groups had their own newspapers. And they were talking about his arrest and how he had been arrested because of this socialist newspaper that he was writing.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave a fiery speech and he was let go. He was a fiery socialist journalist. That's where he started. By 1912, he'd climbed into leadership of the Italian Socialist Party, the PSI, and was editor of their newspaper Avanti, which means forward. And he was a hell of a writer. Combative, witty, radical. He attacked the monarchy. He attacked the church. He attacked the colonial wars that Italy was involved in, which he denounced as capitalist adventures.
Mm-hmm.
Made him sort of the darling of the party's revolutionary wing. Think of the current American president who campaigned on he's going to end all the wars. We've got to get out of the wars. How's that going?
Bad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a process. I'm not gonna lie to you. Oh, and just real quick, because I did a bio on Mussolini years ago. When he was a little boy, he would stand in front of his mirror and practice his speech and his gestures. And one time he was just yelling and screaming, and his mother came in and she's like, "Oh my God, what the fuck is wrong with you?" I don't know how to say that in Italian. And he just said, "Oh, I'm practicing for the day when the world will tremble at my words." Yeah. What? Sorry?
That's how you say it. Che pazzo, che pazzo.
You dumb fuck. So, but no, he was a very powerful speaker. Very powerful. And again, where have we seen that before?
Yeah. So the break came in 1914 when World War I erupted. The PSI, the Socialist Party, stuck to the internationalist orthodoxy. You know, workers have no country, meaning there should be no support for the war. Right. Mussolini at first towed the line. He even coined the slogan, "Not a man, not a cent for the war." But within months, he flipped. He argued that Italy should intervene, not on Germany's side, but with the Allies, because the war could sweep away the old monarchies and the clerical power of the church and would pave the way for a socialist revolution. So he kind of, and this is pre-Russian Revolution, but he's echoing sort of the views of the Bolsheviks, Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky, etc.
Right.
That really we don't have time for some sort of hold hands, love and peace revolution. We need to strike when we can. There needs to be a violent
Yeah.
socialist revolution. We need to
Exactly.
take the power when the opportunity presents itself. But this was heresy to the Socialist Party. Like a lot of people, particularly in the West, I think, since the Cold War, have been educated to believe that socialism is inherently violent. It inherently wants
Good point.
violent overthrow of the established order. But 100 years ago, that wasn't the view of most socialists,
Yeah.
and today isn't the view of most socialists.
Well, they know
Most
where their
socialists,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah. They know where their power is. I mean, if they quit working, it affects those who have, and affects the war effort. So their inactivity can be their weapon. They don't have to go around and smash windows and stab people. So it's in their numbers and their ability to produce or not to produce. Sorry, go ahead.
well, but they also are happy to attempt a political movement
Mhm.
to change
To
the
get the
balance of power and to create
right.
more economic equality. They're happy to do it at the ballot box if that opportunity presents itself. Now, in our Cold War
Right.
show, we've been talking about Castro and his revolution in Cuba, where he
Yeah.
tried to do it at the ballot box,
You
and then
re-
Batista had a coup,
you-
and so there was no election. Then
right.
he tried to do it through the courts, and Batista used his control of the courts to shut that down.
He
So eventually,
exactly.
a
One option
violent
left.
overthrow of the government became
Right.
the last
Yeah.
option, right?
Well, Mussolini's thinking to a degree is I don't want it to take generations to get the kind of country or government that we can have. Short, sharp attack, like a band-aid right off. I mean, you make it intense and you make it bloody, but you also make it quick. At least that's the premise that he's going.
There's also, when you study these things over the last 100 years, what you come to understand is that the slow, peaceful path to equality rarely gets you anywhere
Yeah,
because the people with the money and the power are going to use every tool that they have to give away as little as possible of the money and the power that they have, which it makes sense, right? If you're
exactly.
rich and powerful, you don't want to give any of that up. So you will use your money and your power and your influence
Yeah,
to control the propaganda, to control the education system, to control the legal system, the taxation system, employment, people's ability to feed themselves. You will use every tool that you have to prevent that kind of change or to drag it out as long as possible
absolutely.
because you don't want to give up any of your money or power. That
Right.
is totally reasonable, totally rational. That's what you'd
Absolutely.
expect.
Human nature.
So if you try people who are trying to do it through peaceful, diplomatic, electoral mechanisms are going to find themselves frustrated when the
Yeah.
elite prevent any true meaningful change. They'll allow stuff, they'll toy around the edges. They'll say, okay, we're going to raise the minimum wage by 25 cents an hour. There you go. Aren't you fucking lucky?
Yeah.
Don't
Oh,
look at
we
my yacht and
victory. Exactly. Well,
don't look at my $1 billion.
that's right. One of my houses burned down. Did you see that? Oh man, what are we going to do this summer, Buffy? Anyway, there was a similar, different, but there was a similar thing going on in Japan at this moment, and the philosophy of those who were in power was give them soup, but no fish. So again, you give them a little here and there, but as far as the meat, what they really want to change, no, 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 no. But I'll give you soup all day long. And again, and if you're willing to accept incremental victories over generations, you'll get those, but it will be practically meaningless.
It's bread and circuses from the Roman Empire days, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And, what's happening in the US today is a classic example of this. I've been talking to my older boys about this. it's the culture war. Well, we don't want a class war. We don't want the workers to think about the fact that the rich elite are screwing them over on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So let's turn it into a culture war. Oh, it's about DEI. It's about transgender bathrooms. It's about
Right.
abortion. It's about intellectuals and they're getting everything that they know from books. And it's all about let's create distractions and culture wars, get them obsessed with, oh, vaccines causing autism or
Yeah.
COVID or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Keep them distracted and they're feeling angry. Let's give them fake reasons to be angry, to channel their anger into something that's not the fact that the rich are screwing them over on a daily basis. Well, let's make sure they don't think about that.
Right. Well, my son, well, I should have said that, but he was talking to somebody and I got to hear him, and he doesn't play. He calls a spade, if I may. So he's talking to this guy, and this guy is arguing what you just said, the Republican points. So Matthew goes, your kids can't afford college. You can't afford to retire. You can't afford health care. Houses are going up. They won't be able to buy a house once they do not graduate from college. But yeah, no, let's see if we can get Bad Bunny out of the Super Bowl. Let's see if we can be mean to the trans and kick out everybody who's brown. So all the important stuff that should be important is not, but all the culture shit that is now suddenly more important than your livelihood. Fuck that. And that was a clean version of what he said. But yeah, I mean, it's you give them victories that are meaning, or not even victories, just like you said, just their battle is somewhere else. It's not the economic issues. It's not the power issues. It's the culture issues. Fuck that. But it works brilliantly because it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why they keep using it, because it works.
Exactly.
So anyway, back to Mussolini. So the
Yep.
Socialist Party expelled him in 1914. He resigned from Avanti, the newspaper, and founded his own newspaper, Il Popolo d'Italia, the people
Right.
of Italy, which was openly pro-war and got funding from French and British interests who wanted Italy dragged into the Allied camp.
They know what
So
they're
this
doing.
was sort of the hinge moment. Mussolini transformed from a revolutionary socialist into an interventionist, and that's the path that led him to be one of the founders of the Fasci di Combattimento in 1919, which was the embryo of fascism.
Right.
Pro-war, pro-nationalism, and eventually anti-socialist. So the irony is kind of delicious. He cut his teeth shouting about class struggle and
Right.
anti-militarism, then turned around and used the very tools of socialist agitation
Yeah.
to build one of the most aggressively nationalist movements in history.
Well, it got him financial support from different places, like you just said, but it also got him attention. And again, without making comparisons to anybody else, Mussolini loved the attention. He loved the crowds. He loved shocking people. And I'm not saying that's why he did it, but that's just one of the benefits of, like Italy during the war, switching sides. And he got something out of it. And he's still, in the spotlight, if you will.
So in 1919, he founded the Fasci di Combattimento, the combat leagues in Milan. The word
Mm-hmm.
fasci in Italian means groups or leagues, derived from the fasces, as we mentioned before, the ancient Roman symbol of bundled rods that sort of was meant to stand for strength through unity. So it's a group of something, right? Like a
Right.
group of rods.
Gotcha.
At first, Mussolini's movement was small, chaotic, sort of a mix of disgruntled war veterans, nationalist youth, former socialists like Mussolini himself, even some leftists who had flipped to nationalism, and they wore ragtag black shirts, which was a uniform inspired by an elite Italian unit in World War I called the Arditi. Arditi was sort of a proto special forces, part commando unit, part propaganda symbol. Arditi literally means something like the daring ones, the bold, the daring. Ardito means
The,
bold.
the
They
bold and
are the
beautiful.
Arditi.
Right.
Yeah. So when in 1917, when Italy was bogged down on the front with this sort of bloody static trench warfare against Austria-Hungary, standard infantry assaults weren't really working, chewed through hundreds of thousands of men. So the Italian army experimented with small units of volunteers who were trained to storm enemy trenches with speed, surprise, sheer brutality. These were the arditi. They wore black shirts. And so the fascists took that idea. They're bold, they're daring, they're the shock troops of domestic politics in Italy. And here's where it gets politically messy. So after the war, some Arditi veterans drifted into left-wing paramilitaries, the Arditi del Popolo, the Arditi of the people,
Right.
fighting fascist squads in the streets, but more of them were recruited into Mussolini's black shirts, where their sort of cult of violence directly fed into the fascist aesthetic, which was, we're happy to use violence to bring about a social revolution, not a socialist revolution, but a social revolution. Right. Violence as a political tool became the cornerstone of early fascism as a result of these guys and Mussolini embracing that. And again, keeping in mind, now by the time we get to 1919, 1920, this is after the Bolsheviks have taken control. Well, they're still fighting a civil war in Russia against the powers of the Tsar, the royal supporters, the white forces. Mm-hmm. But they've essentially led the civil war there, led the socialist revolution, taken control from the Mensheviks. And so there's this inspiration coming out of Russia, even though they're doing it from a socialist perspective. Right. The idea of a violent people's overthrow is the marching orders of the day. They've proven it can be done. A small group of violent revolutionaries can rise up and take control.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter that they're coming from the left. It's still inspiring. It still shows it can be done. And not to go too far or to put too fine a point on it, but the more that the black shirts fight the socialists or the unionists in the streets, literally, I mean, there are heads being bashed in the streets of various cities. The people who are noticing this are the landowners, and the industrialists are going, maybe we should, and they will at some point start sliding money Mussolini's way to keep this going. But it's like, we don't get our hands dirty, but we don't mind paying people who are willing to get their hands dirty. So it becomes a marriage of convenience in time.
Yeah, well, it's pretty easy to get backing from industrialists if you're Mussolini and you go to rich industrialists and rich landowners and say, listen, you want someone to stop the socialists? You know that the government's not going to do it. They can't be seen to be doing it. But you slip me some coin, man, so I can arm up and I'll go do it for you.
Yeah, we need bigger and better truncheons. I'm operating outside the law. You're going to pay me in cash under the table or in a paper bag like the CIA decades later. No, don't worry about that for now. We can work this out. We can work this out.
So northern factory owners, especially in Milan and Turin, where they'd seen these workers' strikes and takeovers of factories, saw fascist squads as like a cheap private army to smash strikes and keep factories running.
Yeah.
Companies in steel, chemicals, and textiles slipped Mussolini's movements both money and trucks and equipment. Fiat, Italy's giant car maker under Giovanni Agnelli, is often singled out as having funded and tolerated squad violence against trade unions. Big landowners in the Po Valley, which was sort of the heartland of socialist peasant leagues and anarchist co-ops. Rural landlords pooled funds to arm fascist guards who would literally torch union officers, beat up organisers, drive socialist mayors out of town. The Landowners Association supplied rifles and cash, sometimes funneled through local banks. The middle-class order parties, like professional associations, shopkeepers, chambers of commerce, they chipped in as well. They weren't always writing big checks, but they provided meeting halls, legal cover, legitimacy. Their fear, of course, was that socialism would eat away against their property rights. Then you had the state indirectly supporting it. Local police and army officers often looked the other way or even accidentally misplaced weapons into the hands of black shirts.
Oops.
By 1921-22, elements of the liberal political establishment were quietly subsidizing Mussolini because they saw him as a counterweight to socialism and a useful coalition partner. And
Yeah.
keeping in mind that then, as now, a lot of politicians, if not most, the majority of politicians have links to the elite. They're being funded, supported by the elite, both in terms of their election campaigns and also promises of jobs and gigs post their political career.
Right.
So it's in their best interest to keep the conservative elite happy, whether it's the church in this case or the landowners or the industrialists. So they're willing to turn a blind eye and support Mussolini if he's helping them help their rich elite backers as
Right.
well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the church because eventually some elements of the Catholic Church start going, okay, I mean, violence is horrible, but we kind of understand where Mussolini's coming from. Maybe we can help you out. Business leaders, some parts of the army. And I don't want to jump ahead, but we're getting to a point, which is 1921, because right now it's just violence in the street. It's Mussolini making speeches and meeting the right people, with his palm out. But in 1921, the fascists are going to literally start running people in elections, and they're going to win some seats. So they can say, look, we're not just some crazies. We're not a fringe group. We are a legitimate political party who are being attacked. And so it gives, every little bit that Mussolini can claim legitimacy, it's better for him and his cause.
Yeah. So he cultivated the image of this charismatic grassroots revolutionary,
Right.
but in reality, by this stage, he's materially sustained by Italy's economic elites,
Yeah.
industrial magnates, massive landowners in the countryside, nervous middle-class professionals, and even the church. Because,
Yeah.
of course, in the Russian Revolution, if the socialists take power, they see the church as one of the tools of the control and the oppression of the people. That's
Mm-hmm.
why the socialists in Russia were atheists and got rid of the church. It's also why Napoleon, by the way, didn't get rid of the church per se after he took over the Russian Revolution, but the French Revolution and
Right.
Napoleon, when he became emperor, understood that the church was a political power and had to be
Absolutely.
treated as such, as a rival for political power.
Yeah.
So that's why Napoleon threw the Pope in prison for a while there.
Right. And just to add on,
Right place.
exactly. And how much land, and we're going to get into this later with Mussolini, but the church owns not only the hearts and minds of the people, they own a lot of fucking land, but we'll get to that later. But the one thing that I found interesting, it's about around this time, give or take, where Mussolini starts to, what's the word I'm looking at? Shoot. Anyway, he starts to change his message, target his message for his audience. He starts talking about, instead of we got to do this, and he's still fiery, but it's about law and order. We want stability. We want to be able to help things, the status quo. And again, it's the right terms, it's the right words that the right people want to hear, and they're going to keep pushing money into his hands so he can go out and hire more thugs. So again, it's a beautiful but violent cycle that is just building up, building up, building up in the early 1920s.
So he's going around giving speeches talking about national glory, make Italy great again, the betrayal of Italy by weak liberal leaders.
Yes.
Sound familiar?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, and one more thing, and I don't want to go ahead, but Mussolini was the man to fix it. I alone. You need me to fix. I mean, because I had the loyalty of all these people, all these organizations. I can fix all these problems.
Yeah, me, the cult leader.
Exactly.
So one of the questions I had when I'm reading all of this, because he's got fascist squads roaming the countryside, beating and sometimes killing socialist organizers, intimidating voters.
Yeah.
How does he get away with this? Why isn't he arrested? And the reality is the political and legal system were kind of on his side during all of this. They're willing to turn a blind eye to a lot of this.
Yeah.
Because they're part of the elite as well, right? And
Yeah.
they
They're scared
want
too.
they want to see the socialists destroyed. You have liberal governments, especially under Giovanni Giolitti, who was the prime minister on and off into 1921,
Right.
pursuing essentially a strategy of toleration of the fascists. He kind of thought the fascist squads were a temporary fever that would burn itself out, but in the
Mm-hmm.
meantime, it was a useful counterweight to socialist uprisings. So when fascist gangs were storming city councils, breaking strikes, assaulting peasants, police and magistrates frequently either did nothing or would arrest a few people and then quietly release them later.
Exactly. Yeah.
With some sort of excuse, blah, 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 let them go. In
Right.
many provinces, prefects and police chiefs and even army officers were sympathetic to the fascists, so they would often justify the violence as self-defense against Bolshevik revolutionaries, which meant that official reports would downplay the atrocities, evidence disappeared, charges never stuck.
Yeah.
Well, they were just having a peaceful protest and then they were attacked by the radical left. It's the
Can't they
radical left. It's Antifa that are the real terrorist
Right.
organizations. It was the anti-fascists that are the real
Right.
problem here, you see.
Don't the fascists have the right to defend themselves? That's all they were doing. Yes, I know all those dead
Yeah,
bodies are liberals, but they were defending them. Yeah, come on. Yeah, it's a rigged. Everything is rigged. It's rigged.
but that's what you do. You
Yeah.
you demonize the enemy, make the people believe, or at least just claim anyway,
Yeah.
ramp up the propaganda saying the people fighting the fascists are actually the real bad guys. The fascists are
Exactly.
just
Make
nice, family-loving, everyday people.
lay the groundwork.
When when squad leaders were actually hauled into court, the outcomes were usually acquittals or
Mhm.
suspended sentences. Mussolini himself, after being expelled from the Socialist Party in 1914 and founding Il Popolo d'Italia, didn't face serious charges during the squad violence era. He was too valuable to the elite. And then by the early 1920s, he was also an elected deputy in parliament, which gave him parliamentary immunity. So you couldn't be
Yeah.
arresting a guy
Yeah.
who was a member of parliament. That's
Yeah.
political
Working from the inside.
intimidation. Yeah.
Yeah, working from the inside to bring it down. You can't touch them. And I don't want to jump ahead, but at the very, very tippy top is King Victor Emmanuel III. He's afraid of civil war. He's not sure what to do. He doesn't know his governments can handle it. So he refuses to sign certain documents that he needs to sign to turn the army loose on the fascists. But like you said, there's a lot of people in the army going, I like what they're doing. I can see that they're saving Italy. So I don't know if it would have done any good, but again, that's what you do. You create a climate where the other guys are automatically painted the bad guys. If anything, you're the hero. So if you're the hero, anything you do is going to be excused because you're doing it for the right reason. I mean, again, I think Chancellor Palpatine would have went, good job. That well played. Good job. And it's working brilliantly for Mussolini.
So by 1921-22, fascist squads were being openly recruited into local police forces, which essentially legalized their activities. And, once Mussolini entered government, that line vanished altogether. But, we started this show seeing if we can draw parallels to the US. Do you have forces that are quasi-legalized running around beating up enemies of the state, Ray?
I mean, if you want to say it like that, yes. When you don't have to identify yourself, when you don't have to use procedures, when you can ignore the due process of law, when you have a mask, when you make someone disappear and you don't let them contact anybody, family or lawyer for a while, that is violating the very basis of what it means to an American citizen. Not unlike when the Roman Empire was falling apart, when we were talking about the brothers Gracchi, when violence became acceptable, where before in the streets of Rome it wasn't. Yes, there are parallels, and for someone to say there aren't, I'm sorry, but I don't know what color the sky is in your world. There are parallels.
In the United States a few years ago, you had a bunch of people try and storm the Capitol and hang the
Yeah,
vice
patriots,
president.
right? Right.
Uh, and then they all got released,
Yeah.
and all absolved of their crimes. And now you have these armed thugs, masked, anonymous armed thugs roaming city streets, just grabbing people, beating people up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember having a debate with our friend David Markham in the first Trump term, talking
Right.
about the rise of fascism and being told, well, it can't be fascism because they don't have armed thugs roaming the streets. It's like, give it time.
Give it to,
Give it time.
he's working up to it. Can't you see? Come on.
Yeah.
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 No.
And we
Yeah.
know that he was trying to do that in his first administration, but people that he had, like General Mattis, etc., that were part of his inner circle at the time, wouldn't let him do it. They kept stopping him. There were some adults
Yes.
in the room still.
Who were
So he
literally
made
saying,
sure this time
yeah,
around
get
he
rid of
had
the
no
adults.
adults in the room. He had
Exactly.
Fox News hosts in the room.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah.
So this campaign of political violence, the purpose of it was to show that the democratic government was too feeble to maintain order, and only the fascists could stand up to the left and make Italy great again. And so by October 1922, Mussolini made his move. Thousands of black shirts converged on Rome, the famous March on Rome, this massive show of force. It was sort of more a propaganda tool than a real actual coup, this fascist armed insurrection. We have to overthrow the weak government because they don't have the power to maintain order, only we do.
To stop us.
It wasn't
They can't
an actual
stop.
coup, but
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
yeah, only the coup can stop a real coup. It created chaos and fear. The Italian king, you mentioned before, he was being pressured by conservative advisors and overestimated maybe Mussolini's strength at the time. But anyway, invited Mussolini to form a government rather than risk civil war. So on October 30th, 1922, Mussolini was appointed prime minister legally by the king.
Legally.
Which
yes.
makes it the first fascist seizure of power in history. He didn't need to actually do a coup. He just needed to threaten that he could do a coup. And the elites did what they kind of wanted to do anyway, which was to give him power to go and shut down the strikes and the trade unions and the socialists and all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
The fascist propaganda later made the March on Rome into this big heroic revolution, but in reality, Mussolini was handed power by panicking rich elites who were worried that they were going to lose their money and their power, and they thought that putting Mussolini in control would prevent all of that from happening.
And the other part of it, I don't know if we're going to go into it or not, but so now Mussolini is legally the head of a coalition government, but there is still freedom of the press. There is still a right to assembly. There are still others in the government who are not fascist. That's stage 2. Don't get me wrong. He's still got a ways to go. But like you just said, he was literally handed the powers, the keys to the government.
And then the essential weakness of Italian democracy was exposed and it all crumbled. Instead of strengthening democracy, he basically destroyed it from within, dismantled it pretty quickly. Basically, fascist violence continued against any remaining opponents he had. In 1924, a socialist parliamentarian, Giacomo Matteotti, was murdered by fascist thugs after he spoke out about black shirt violence. A crisis ensued, and instead of punishing the perpetrators, Mussolini took responsibility and used the opportunity to tighten his grip. He said, we have to do this. We have to get rid of the enemies of the state. It reminds me of a little speech that your President Trump gave in front of a group of generals a week or so ago, where he said we now need to fight the war within.
Right.
You've been focused on the war without. Big problem is we need to now focus you on the war within, the radical left.
Right.
We need to focus on defeating the radical left.
Let's forget that they're Americans and they have rights. They are now the enemy, and that's where I expect you to get your experience, busting their heads in.
Nice. In January 1925, Mussolini proclaimed a dictatorship, assumed full power, and declared he would tolerate no further dissent. And by 1926, all opposition parties were banned, censorship was in place, and Italy was a one-party police state. Now, got some more here, but before I move on, I just want to look at the parallels. We've said this a number of times, that you don't go from the beginnings of fascism to complete fascist dictatorship overnight. In Mussolini's case, he broke from the socialists in 1914, started his campaign of violence, and it wasn't until 1926 that Italy was in full fascism. I mean, he proclaimed the dictatorship in 25. It was in 26 that he crushed all dissent. So you've got 12 years of him building this before he's actually takes full control. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow step by step process.
Yeah.
And same thing happened in Germany, which we'll get to in the next episode. But the same thing is happening in the United States these days. People go, well, it doesn't look like that. But you can't look at the end point of fascism and say, well, it doesn't look like that today, because it takes time to build. Yeah. They need to put the steps and they need to convince but you can't, overthrow the state overnight. Usually, I mean, you can, but it's risky.
Yes.
You need to slowly destroy your enemies, your opponents, the tools of the state that could stand up against you bit by bit by bit, until the time is right and there's not enough opposition and you can make the final break. Trump in the news today is talking about the Insurrection Act. If courts continue to stop him from sending National Guard into places like Chicago or Portland, he can just use the Insurrection Act powers to do it. You just need to
he'll get there.
Time it.
Yeah. My favorite thing is watching people walk around Portland with their phone on live going, look at all the violence. Look at all the gangs. Look, it's a beautiful, quiet city. People are having fun. So again, but if you don't watch any of that and you're a Fox News commentator, you don't know anything else. And that's the point.
War-ravaged Portland.
Sorry.
I'm saying that people in Afghanistan are sitting around going, holy shit. I mean, we might have a rough. People in Gaza are going, listen, we may be subjected to a genocide, but thank God we don't live in Portland, man.
Thank God. Thank Christ.
There's always someone worse than you, kids.
And it's Portland,
people
baby.
In Portland got it far worse.
Let's pray for Portland. Yeah.
People in Gaza are doing collections for the people in Portland.
Just
sending
a couple
food.
Of dollars, whatever you can give. Send it to portland.com. I don't know. Jeez.
So the fascist regime then touted this new era of national unity with the slogan, all within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state.
And it's time to expand. But that's another part that we'll get into. That's one of the questions. To be a fascist government, is expansion one of your tenets or not? And we'll get to that in the future.
Mussolini styled himself Il Duce, the leader. There was this personality cult built up around him.
Yeah.
Personality cult. I'm not sure. Do you have a personality cult in the US, Ray? I'm not sure. I don't think. Yes. Definitely have a personality cult.
I mean, I try. Are you talking about me or... Never mind. We'll talk about that later.
You and I have been complaining for decades now that we don't have a cult. Why don't we have a cult? We should have. Why don't we deserve a cult?
No, we do.
What a cult leader's got that we don't have?
Followers,
we
money.
have a cult, but it's a very small cult. It's a niche.
We have quality cult, not quantity.
It's a punk rock cult. It's ahead of its time. It's small, passionate cult.
The history books are going to go, those guys were fucking, I mean, at that time, people thought they were shit. Don't get me wrong, but in 20 years from now, punk rockers.
One day somebody will make a documentary about what cult leaders we were, early the punk rock podcast, then people will go, now I get it. Then they get on board. People have T-shirts saying, I knew Ray and Cam. I would listen to Ray and Cam before they were cool. So what did fascist rule, to wrap up this episode, what did fascist rule look like in Italy? Mussolini's government was authoritarian, but in some ways pretty pragmatic. He struck deals with powerful institutions like the monarchy and the Catholic Church.
Right.
Signed the Lateran Pact with the Pope in 1929, reconciling with the Vatican. The economy was organized under a system called corporatism, which was trying to end class conflict by organizing employers and workers into state-controlled syndicates, though in practice it largely crushed independent labor and empowered the industrialists.
Yeah.
But it was all run by the state. The state got to decide how everything worked. Nothing could be organized outside of the state. And they glorified youth action and loyalty. Children joined fascist youth organizations to be indoctrinated in militaristic values. Dissenters could face jail, exile, or worse.
Yeah.
They never reached the industrial scale terror later seen in Nazi Germany or under Stalin during the purges in the USSR.
That takes work.
It was the beginnings of that. It was the idea of this state crushing of dissent.
Yeah. But don't think that we're not fair and balanced, because what else did the fascists do? Because they did some good things. They also started the film festival in Italy, in Venice. The film festival started in 1932. And occasionally, and this was one of his campaigning promises, the trains occasionally ran on time. So again, don't say they're all bad, because that would be inaccurate. We don't do that here. Film festival and train.
Yeah, and even under the Nazis, they built the autobahns and the Volkswagen, man.
Yeah.
So there was good things happened, progress.
I'm uncomfortable.
Notably, though, Italy's fascists didn't preach biologically based racism to the extent that the Nazis did. They even had Jewish party members in the early years. They did end up with anti-Semitic laws in 1938 under pressure from Hitler.
Yeah.
But they didn't start that way.
Yeah.
So people say, well, it can't be fascism in the United States because we love the Jews. Yeah, it's not fascism isn't about anti-Semitism. That was just a particular aspect of the Nazi Party's ideology.
Yeah.
The core of Italian fascist ideology was ultranationalism and statism, the belief that the nation was the supreme value and individuals should be molded into a disciplined collective that served the state's glory. Mussolini wrote, "If the 19th century was the century of the individual, we are free to believe that this is the century of the state, a fascist century." So it's all about what's good for the state. You have to subject your individualism to what's good for the country, not what's good for you as the individual. The state was the embodiment of the nationalist spirit, and totalitarian in the sense that the total of all human enterprise in Italy had to be about the strength of the state.
The state is all.
And Italians were told they were part of a grand mission to revive the Roman Empire.
Oh, you should have led with that. I would have signed up. You should. Sorry.
Going back to his socialist days where he was criticizing Italy's colonial wars, now he's increasing their colonial wars in North Africa, intervention in the Spanish Civil War to support Franco.
Yeah.
As you said before, expansion. By the 1930s, Italy had become a model that others on the far right looked to, even as he started to be overshadowed by an even more extreme imitator in Germany, young Adolf Hitler, which we'll get to in our next episode.